a demonstration of Gimlet. So this is a statistics tracking software with an emphasis on how this product can be customized with input from staff at all levels and how data can be leveraged to make decisions about staffing, signage, and much more. And Jen today is going to bring us, she has experience using this product at her former library and then now at the West Des Moines Public Library. And Jen Ozick today, Jen grew up in the Chicago area, like I did, and has spent 18 years of public library experience in Illinois and St. Louis City, which I'm also very familiar with St. Louis itself too. So, and she's been the head of adult services at West Des Moines Public Library for the past 3 years. So, in her previous career in library, she didn't think data was interesting. However, after 18 years, she finds it fascinating. Although her favorite quote is, "Data without context is meaningless," and I thought that that should be the takeaway quote from everything today. Data without context is meaningless. So write that down. So without further ado, here's Jen. Jen.
Okay. Hey everybody, I am going to share my screen because of a slide deck, and then we're going to be coming out of the slide deck to do a quick demo. Okay. Can everybody see that okay?
Looks great.
Great.
Okay,
Okay.
you want to do
So,
you want the slides, right? It's the slides.
yep, it's the
Okay,
slides. There we
great.
go. So I'm going to talk about what we use to track our statistics here and how I kind of started doing this a couple years ago. Gimlet is the statistic tracking software, but I'm going to talk about how it can be customized with input from staff at all levels. This is who I am. I have been here about 3 years. I previously was a regional manager in St. Louis City System at the Carpenter branch. And we used Gimlet in St. Louis City System. And when I talk about St. Louis, I say city system because there's St. Louis City and there's St. Louis County, and they are not the same thing. The thing is that this is not just about collecting data, it's determining what you want to collect and why. And wrangling, it's essential so that it's consistent and streamlined. So I'm going to talk about what Gimlet is, why we use it, how we use it, and why most of the time people think it's pretty awesome. And that image at the bottom is what it looks like for part of it. But before we start, you're going to hear me say thoughtful a lot because it's not just about collecting data. So you can use anything to collect the data. You want to think about what's important, why, and how it's going to be used. And I am using images from Yellowstone, the TV series, because I discovered it and have been watching it. And there's wranglers, so we're going to do that. So there are some really quick stats. So last year, this is how many interactions we had and how many reference we had out of that. And I ran that report in 3 seconds. So when you look at those numbers, that's a lot. Now, it doesn't matter how big you are, though. It's not about, your numbers. It's about keeping track of what you need to keep track of, what you want to keep track of. So what is Gimlet? It is software. There's my other cowboy. It lets you customize your data collections. So it is really fast to set up. It takes about 10 minutes to do the basic setup. It is intuitive for staff and it's very easy. So I'd say you can sit down with staff individually or with groups, and in under 30 minutes, people get how to use it. The data visualization reports run in about 3 to 4 seconds, and there's different types of reports you can run. There's also transparency for everybody. So with Gimlet, you can create logins for departments. You can create logins for individuals. The administrator level login is the only one that can change the form, but every single person can run reports. And that kind of transparency is something a lot of people really like. I have to update the cost. They just raised it to $32 a month. So it's $32 a month. It's pretty low cost. So if your library budget allows, it's pretty cheap. If you're thinking, okay, it's 30 days in a month, it's like $1 a day, but it's unlimited users. What it also is it replaces the paper tick mark or hash mark forms that a lot of us have used. Where I've been, they were only the paper forms at the reference desk. But we know that in a lot of libraries, everybody is answering questions from patrons. Everybody is telling them where the bathrooms are or where the large print collection is. And so Gimlet allows us to collect the data from every single place, in person, on the phone, emails, outreach. It also lets you see trends. And so when you replace the paper and you can run all those reports, you can see what your data is telling you. But quickly, it replaces the paper, it captures all of your interactions, and it lets you see what you're doing. So if there's a particular desk where people are saying, oh my gosh, we're always slammed between 2 and 4 o'clock, this product will let you back that up because you'll be able to see all those interactions. Now, it does not replace your ILS data. So we don't use it to track checkouts because that's not what it's for. It doesn't replace your ILS. It doesn't say this is how many library card holders you have. It doesn't replace your gate count if you use one of those or a people counter. It doesn't collect every single bit that the state wants. Sorry. It captures a lot, but as we all know, different states, especially, they might have different requirements. It doesn't capture anything. Also, it's not the only game in town. So there are other products. I'm just focusing on what I have experience with. The main thing that you really want to talk to staff about when you're thinking about using a data collection system like software is you want to be thoughtful about how you're using it. So when I was in St. Louis, I was not part of the group that chose the product, but when we started using it, after the first couple of days, I contacted my manager, the director of branches, and said, okay, we need to streamline this and make it consistent because I've got 4 branches. They're all using it a little bit differently. The data is going to be all over the place. And so we put it on pause. She gave me the unofficial title of Gimlet Wrangler. But then that was actually how some people would refer to me. But I started working with the other 3 regional managers, director of branches, director of central, other people in admin, and then we did some streamlining so that when we were collecting our data, it was consistent because you don't want everybody using it all over the place. It's definitely wrangling. So if you think of your data like all the cows, you can have them out in the pasture, but at some point you want to collect them in so you can count how many you have. We need wranglers to help with that. So when I brought it here to West Des Moines, we worked together and I worked with each department. So then what we did was we used it for a couple of weeks with youth services and we looked at what data we wanted to collect and we created that. Then I went to the next department. So it lets staff become really engaged in the process and it makes development natural and it gives people ownership of it. So how does it work? Okay, well, it's pretty simple. The basic form is what it is. How long did it take? Who wants to know? How did they ask you? Where did you help them? And then there's Q&A boxes that let you put in free text if you want to. But the tags allow for easy identification. So you might have somebody come up to the desk and say, do you have this book? And you realize, yes, we do, but it's not on the shelf. We're going to put a hold on it. Type is reference, tag is collection. There's also difficulty levels. This is one of the things I actually don't like about Gimlet. most of the time, the difficulty levels in a regular library are the questions are a 1. Sometimes they're a 2 if you're spending a lot of time with people. But even when I was in St. Louis and director of research collections, our more difficult questions that took time only were a level 3. Nobody goes up to a 6. But one of the really nice things is it auto captures the date and time of your transaction, but you can go back in and change it if you need to do that. So the basic form you can adjust as you need to, and you create all the tags. And so that means you can completely customize it, be thoughtful when you set it up, and you let everybody have input. So it doesn't matter if you're coming from a small library or a really big system. St. Louis Public is, I want to say, 11 active locations. And so building it here at West Des Moines, each department let us do it gradually. And so we knew that the data that we were capturing for the first couple of months, it was not going to be 100% accurate, but we wanted to be thoughtful about it. We also adjust as needed, and that is why I remain the Gimlet Wrangler. So this is just a quick roadmap. I used it in St. Louis, then brought it here as an idea. We got a demo with admin team. Our director at the time approved it. I started with the structure, went department by department. I also created Gimlet guidelines. That's something that we used in St. Louis, and a frequent Gimleting document. Now, quickly, Gimlet is the name of the product. My team in St. Louis started using it as a verb. So Gimleting is the act of using the product. To gimlet something is to use the product. So I also use it as a verb. And then now our data collection of this library is very streamlined, but we adjust and monitor it and adjust where needed. Okay, so I'm going to hit escape. I'm going to come out of my demo and I'm going to show you what it looks like. So this is what Gimlet looks like at our library. And you can see these are the elements: type, duration, who wants to know, how they asked you, and where. And you can see there's a bunch of locations here. Your Q&A, those are optional. And then here are the tags. Here's my duration down here. It auto fills. So for example, somebody comes to the adult services desk. They're like, hey, do you have this whole series by Anne Perry? We're like, let's check. Or they say, do you have any books by Anne Perry? And we're saying, I don't know, what series are you looking for? Once we finish that interaction or transaction, depending on what your library calls it, we Gimlet it. It was a reference question. It took about this long, and the grown-up asked us, they were in person, and they were at this desk. They asked about the collection, and maybe we had to put something on hold. And I do that. You can put your initials in, you don't have to, and you hit save. Maybe the next person is somebody where they walk up and they're like, where's the bathroom? Maybe they're a teen. And you say, okay, directional, it was a teen in person. Maybe you happen to be at the children's desk. This is how you would Gimlet it. But we do on here have a tag for restrooms. And I would hit save. The reason that we created it like this, and we have all these different types and tags, is because this is the data that we want to track. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and how the data can be used. But out of the box, this is what you have. You have all of this stuff at the top, and then you add the tags. And I'm going to come down on my page a little bit, and you can see these are the last things that were Gimleted. So I can see that at 3:03, somebody called the reference desk, the adult services desk, and got helped with something for a program registration. I can see there was a question about notary. I can see that there was stuff being looked up on people's library account from the circulation desk. And so it doesn't matter where people are answering the questions or helping the patrons. You're capturing every single bit of that really, really good data. because over here is where you can run your reports. Remember I said anybody at any level can run a report. I like to start with overview. The basic overview looks like this. So we can see that it ran me basically like a couple weeks worth of data. I can change that up here. So I can say, okay, I want to look at last week. Maybe I don't care about comparing it, and I can say apply. Do you see how fast that is? Super fast. And I can see, okay, so last week in the library, staff had 967 transactions. Or because a transaction, I always say it's a transaction, not a reference question, because not everything is a reference question. So I can see though that 252 of those were reference questions. We did 213 things that involved our study rooms. We had 163 things that were technology, and the majority of these were quick. I can see the majority of them were asked by adults. See how as I come down, there's all of this different data, and it gives me the numbers. Now I'm like, well, what were all those technology things? When I click on that, it now gives me the data a little bit differently, just for that type though. So it's not giving me everything. It's just giving me, these are the technology things from last week. Most of them were quick. Oh, surprise, surprise. Not really. Most of them were print release. So we have a print release system that I think the software folks like to think that it's super intuitive, but for most of our patrons, it is not. And we have to explain how it works or help them with it. Or we hear the vending machine release all their change and we're like, okay, we know we have to go help them. And so we can see there's all of those things, but we can also see, okay, so we had 21 people that we helped explain the wireless printing to. So when we look at the reports, I'm going to come back to overview again. I can clear everything. I can say, okay, I'm going to run last month and I'm going to compare it to the previous month. And I can see the high points. I can see the low points. Depending on your hours, you're going to see different things. So if you're closed on a holiday or if you are not open on Sundays, all of these things come into play when you're looking at the data. You can do a detailed report. You can say, okay, I want to see just how busy are we between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And I can come down and I can say, okay, so I just want to see like a certain type of question, or I want to see everything that's at the children's desk, and it will rerun the report for me. And it literally took not even 2 seconds to do that. You can export all of these things. But what I really like about it, and usually with my experience with this product, which is now, I've used it for a couple of years, most of what we do is we use the overview and the detailed reports. But the overview is super helpful if you need a visual to give to somebody else, like your board, or your stakeholders, or anybody else. You know, maybe there are people saying like, gosh, it feels like we get a lot of questions about where the large print collection is. You're like, let's see if we do. So then we go in and we look at this and we say, are we getting a lot of questions? Or people will say, we're slammed on this desk between 2 and 4. We look at the Gimlet data and we say, okay, actually, you're slammed between 1 and 3. Or I'm not showing that you're slammed, so let's talk about what's going on at the desk. You know, maybe they're not slammed, but they're spending longer times with people because they're doing a lot of readers advisory. And so it really depends on that, but the data is now going to back up all of your hunches. So you're collecting the data. You are collecting what you need to collect. So for us, we go beyond necessarily what the state wants, and we're going to collect other statistics. You'll see there's a tag here for elevator assistance. Okay, And when I hover over it, it says 122. That's because there's 122 things that have this tag. We have had problems with our elevators. Knocking on wood, hopefully not anymore. But for a while, we did, and we had to route people to the staff elevator and help them up and down the elevator. And we were trying to tell the city, look, we're getting stuck, like we're having to do this a lot. Staff are leaving the desk to try to do elevator stuff. And the city at first was like, well, it's not really that many people, is it? When we Gimlet, we can tell them. So we could say, okay, we're going to run a report for whatever the period of time was. Maybe let's just pretend it was last week. Okay, well, city guys, just last week, over those, 7 days, we had 60 interactions with people just about the elevators. Oh, okay. So your data that you collect, you can use for various things. And I know I was in one of the other sessions listening, and somebody was talking about data is what helps you tell your story. And that's definitely true, but it helps you make decisions. And so, like, if you're getting a lot of directional about where your bathrooms are, look at your signage. Maybe you need better signage. If you're getting a lot of people saying, hey, we are answering a lot of questions about the mobile app, like people don't know that we have it. Oh, maybe we should promote the mobile app. And so we use all of that. The guidelines that we use look like this. We did this in St. Louis. So again, I brought that here. Here's about that. We brought that here, and this gives staff the guidelines so that the data collection is consistent, because that's what you have to have. It doesn't matter if you're using a paper form and a tick mark or a hash mark. It has to be consistent. You really can't have 3 people on one desk saying, oh, when this happens, I do this, and 2 people on a different desk saying, oh, well, when that identical thing happens, I track it differently. You want to be completely consistent. So the Gimlet guidelines allow us to do that. These get updated whenever there's a change made, and that's something that the Wrangler does. So I'm the head Wrangler, the only Wrangler. This is what I do. So for example, when we train on this, people can refer to this. What's the difference between a directional and a reference? Directional is inside your building. If people are like, where is the post office? That's a reference question. Which post office? When do you want to go? Maybe you're giving them their hours. Library information. We just added a tag for something for display. And so this is not the active guidelines. This is my example. But anytime we add something, we do that, and then we put an example in, and then I put something on. We use Microsoft, so I put something on Teams, and I alert all staff. Hi, there's a new tag. This is how you use it. Here's an example. Type equals this, tag equals that. And so having all of these explains to staff how they're supposed to use it. And sometimes you are not really using it a lot because, like Reader's Advisory, it's kind of hard to Gimlet that because you're talking about the collection, but maybe you're answering, Anne Perry wrote more than one series. Which one are you interested in? What's this series about? I like Anne Perry. Who else would I like to read? I mean, we all know Reader's Advisory is kind of, it's a little bit more slippery to track that data, but you're still tracking it because in Gimlet, there's a type, Reader's Advisory. So maybe I say, Reader's Advisory, 10 minutes. The person was in person. They were at the adult services desk, and I helped them with that. But my question would be, likes Patterson and Baldacci. Okay. And then I put in here, like, lots of other authors, whoever they are. So there's that for staff, because you could run a report just on your Reader's Advisory types and see what kind of Reader's Advisory questions are people answering. Maybe you and your staff are like, hey, we really want to track Reader's Advisory. So we want to make sure that we're using it this way. Maybe in Gimlet, you're going to say, anytime there's Reader's Advisory, put as much on the Q&A as you possibly can. Or you create a tag for something. Maybe you want to track how often you're doing reuse advisory for a new part of your collection or something. All of these things are completely customizable. Okay, I'm going to come back to my slide presentation. So I don't want to go too wild showing everybody Gimlet because I love Gimlet so much.
I
But
I had a question, Jen, just off the
yeah,
does that if you link the tags you have there, if you don't know off the dome which tag is which or that kind of thing, does it relate to does it have some way to tell you, behavior means other, so if you type in it was a behavior question and then
no,
it types of an other, it doesn't, so you have to figure out which of
you
those
have
tags to
to,
try.
yeah, you have to think about what you're doing.
Okay.
And so when we train on Gimlet, when we train um, new staff always work with other staff before we kind of let them loose on their own. They always are with somebody else. And so when we talk about Gimleting, we do that. But also people will ask a lot of questions. They'll put it in our Microsoft Teams like, hey, I had this interaction. How do I Gimlet this? And then I'm always happy to answer that. And if we get a lot of that, I revise the guidelines to put that example in there. We also have a document called Frequently Gimleted Questions. And that was at the suggestion of one of my team members who was like, I work on these two different desks and they get different questions. Could you create that? And so I worked with each department and we created that. So staff have access to that and the guidelines. Most of the time, once people get the hang of it, they're just doing it and it's consistent. Um, these slides, I was already talking about some of this, but now you've seen what it looks like. You can compare the data, but data without context is meaningless. You are the person or the staff or the library, whatever, you bring the context to your data. It doesn't matter if my library is collecting something, it doesn't have to be exactly the same for your library. You might say, I don't really care about directional stuff for the bathroom, but we get asked about, this art collection a lot, or we get asked where this other thing is. It's all up to you. The other thing is that when you run those reports, you're going to bring the context. You might see your data dip all of a sudden, and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened last week? Like, we have 3 days where there's almost no data. Maybe you had a water main break and that location was closed. So that is the context that you bring to your data. No matter what, though, you want to be consistent with your data collection so that it's not all over the place. Consistency makes sure that everything makes sense. You want to be thoughtful. It is so tempting to want to collect every single little piece of data, especially with a tool like this, because it is kind of fun. But the thing is that you want to be thoughtful. When we started, okay, so we want to know, are people asking about our programs? Yes, they are. People were saying, well, we need a tag for baby doll story time and this story time and craft program and not a craft program and a book group. And I was like, wait. There's too much going on here. You don't want too many tags. What do you really want to know? People are asking about programs for kids. Okay, that's what we do. So that's how we change the type, change the tag. So it's programs. In the Q&A, people can always put baby doll story time. So if we launch a new program and we find we're getting a lot of questions about it, we can put that in the Q&A, go back and be like, wow, we really got a lot of questions. Maybe we need to make the information clearer for our patrons, or we need to publicize it differently, or whatever it is. But you want to be thoughtful because it's super easy to just go, I want every single piece of data, which is great, but not always. And you always want to bring the context to your data. So, whatever tool you use, it's people consistently working together that achieve the best results. And so there's my cowboys up there. Rip can't do it all by himself. He needs everybody else to sometimes, herd the cattle. So when we use our data here, these are things that we look at. We look at the data for the hour, for the week. Maybe we need to adjust staffing. Now, in the ideal world, I would have so many staff that I would be able to have 2 people on our public desk for adult services all the time. And I don't. But maybe you need to adjust your staffing. Look at your directional. Maybe you need better signage. Maybe something needs to be moved. Maybe your large print collection is in an area where the lighting isn't really good and nobody knows that it's there. Library info, if everybody's asking about something, maybe you need to promote it. Is it clear and easy for people to find? Just because you think that it's clear and easy to find does not mean that it is. We use a tag called not available. And we do that because our study rooms are super, super popular. And sometimes we have to turn people away. We have no rooms available. We decided we wanted to track that because in the event that someday, if it could happen and we had a branch, then we know to say, okay, we need a lot of study rooms. We don't want just 2 study rooms. If we have a branch and it's pie in the sky, whatever you can have, we know that we want study rooms. We know that because we can pull up those reports that show how many times we've had to tell people they aren't available, because those are type equals meeting in study rooms, tag equals not available. Or maybe it's something that you don't have. Are you getting questions about cake pans? Maybe there's something like that. So we look at those. Maybe it's something that people want to do and you just don't have that ability. So not available, it seems like maybe a kind of a funny thing to tag, but it can be really, really useful. Also, do you need to show this kind of stuff to your board at your monthly board meeting? Do you need to justify why you're asking for something? More people, more space, more whatever. The reports like this from Gimlet that have the data visualization can make that super, super easy. So like here, our executive admin assistant, that's Susan Greenwood, she puts all of our stats into FUPI for the state. And by the way, we love FUPI. FUPI is awesome. Gimlet makes it super easy to gather the data, and it takes her 5 seconds, probably like, to figure out what she wants to run on the report, pull up FUPI and put it in there. But she also, like the rest of us on the admin team, looks across the data. So this is why the consistency in the data is super, super important, because sometimes you have to look across the data to look at it. When are we busiest? So for example, on Sundays, we're only open for a few hours. We might not have as many people here, but those people, they might be, boom, using lots of study rooms, doing lots of printing. Maybe that's our high day for readers advisory. We also track notarizations. So there's 2 of us that are notaries, Susan and myself, and looking at that data, okay, when are we notarizing the most? Do we need an additional person? Are we getting so many requests that we should start asking people to make appointments? So the data in Gimlet really, really helps us when it's time to look at staffing, look at the budget. If there's a question about the budget and your open hours, Gimlet is going to give you the data that you need, because there is no second guessing like, well, it feels like, everything kind of drops off after 6 o'clock. So do we really need to be open until 8 o'clock? Look at the Gimlet data and it will tell you if you're busy or not. The gate count is one thing. Something like Gimlet will give you every piece of that, because you can be like, where are we? What are we doing? It seems like there's nobody in here, but the people who are in your library are really actively using it. Whatever you use. And as much of a fan of Gimlet as I am, because I love, love, love Gimlet, look at it when you're setting it up and be thoughtful. So I always say, like, look at what the state requires. Can you configure your Gimlet to give you that data? Because running those reports is so fast. Think about something building specific for you. It could be restrooms. I think it's kind of like a universal truth that in most places, some of the frequent questions that we get are, where's the bathroom? But think about if there's something that you want for that. And then anything else that you find super helpful and you maybe want to enhance your data collection. So maybe it's not enough for you to be like, yeah, we help people print. Okay, maybe you want to know how often you're helping people scan versus actually use the printer. But again, don't get too far into the little details because it's easy to just have way too many tags right there. You want to use something like programs and then a Q&A for those details that you need. The other tip is I really strongly advise if you use something like Gimlet, you create guidelines. That explains why you're using it and also helps you remind like, this is why we use it, this is how we use it, and this is how it works. But really explaining how to use it. And when we did that in St. Louis, that chart was something that a lot of people referred to. And so they know, okay, this is the type. What does that mean? What is a reference question versus a directional question? What makes it technology help versus a reference question? You break it down how you want. But the chart that shows the type and the tag and how they are used is pretty essential to make sure that your data collection is consistent. Consistency makes sure that the data makes sense. You want to be able to look at your data, look across your data however you want, and have it be consistent. So you're like, wait, why are there all these reference questions one day, and then like the next day they're completely done differently? You don't want that. To get the best out of your data, it has to be consistent collection. The other thing about guidelines is if you have staff that are part-time who aren't using your data collection product all the time, it's super handy to have that reference. So like for us, we have it available. I'm sure people have print copies, but we use SharePoint and it's on there for people. The nice thing about Gimlet is you can always adjust along the way. And so if you start out and you start kind of small with a product like Gimlet and you're like, I just want to track these couple of things, that's great. And then if you decide along the way you want to add something, you can add it. The thing to remember is if you delete something that you're already using, it will affect that data. So let's just say you during summer read want to track a certain kind of interaction and you add that tag and you tag like 50 things with that and then you realize that is not helpful data and you want to remove the tag, it will impact all those things that you use the tag on. It'll remove those. Here what we do is we started basic and then we kept adding to it and then we talk about it. The Gimlet Wrangler is just that. I am not the only one that makes the decision on this. But if somebody decides, hey, wouldn't it be great, like the other day, wouldn't it be great if we had a tag for display? We were hosting an exhibit. We were starting to get a couple of questions. Where is this exhibit? What is this? Where did it come from? Like, maybe that would be good. And we created display. We have a blind date with a book display that's super popular. People ask, where is it? How does it work? What does it all mean? That tag now lets us track that. Location, we added summer read table because we realized that the staff and the volunteers working our summer read table downstairs in the children's area were answering all kinds of questions that didn't have anything to do with summer read. Where is the bathroom? Where are the picture books? And we wanted to capture the work that those staff were doing. That's the thing about a tool like Gimlet. It lets you support all of your staff because it is a really quick way to show all of their hard work. That person at the circulation desk who answers all kinds of questions that never made it onto that paper tick sheet, now their hard work, you can see that. You can see that they're helping people. That person who, is on the floor shelving books, giving people directions, helping them find things, you are supporting that work because you're like, hey, come back to the public desk and we'll Gimlet that for you. So The important thing to do though is as you adjust that you are updating your guidelines and you're taking everybody on the journey. You don't want to just add whatever you want and then nobody knows. Okay. And that is my slide deck. That's me. That's where to find me. Or you can Google me because my last name, I think there's only two of us in Iowa, me and my husband. That is the last slide that I always have to say thank you for the people who make these great slide decks that I use. And now I'm done. Okay.
Okay, I'm seeing
Questions?
nice comments. That they love both Hoofi and Gimlet in Orange City. But I had a question before someone else comes up with one, but maybe they just want to start off. Um, the difficulty scale, how do you implement that? What difference does that make?
Yeah, so the difficulty scale is built into the base model for Gimlet. You can't get rid of it. I kind of wish that you could. So in St. Louis, we looked at this and we were like, okay, a one is a base level question. You know, do you have this book? Where is this? Do you have this program? Can I register? All the stuff that we just spend a few minutes on. A level two question is, I need to do some research and I don't know how to use any of these databases. And you're spending a lot more time helping them. Or they come up and they've got a really in-depth reference question. Like, hey, I need to find all the different kinds of companies that do this specific thing in the metro area for Denver or whatever. And it's a more in-depth thing. You're pulling from more than one source. You're trying to pull that information together. At our library, I mean, I can consider us like a medium-sized public library. We never go to a three. In St. Louis, in Central Library, which has research collections, rare books, archives, a lot of kind of specialized things, level three questions can happen. They are the questions that require multiple resources to help find information for the patron, usually things where you're calling them back. They aren't done by everybody. They aren't the first, questions that you get. They are the ones that are passed on to the subject specialists who are doing research. So somebody's saying, hey, I'm looking at this house in St. Louis and I want to know who lived here before, or was this a business, and who owned the business. And, the people in the St. Louis room are like, hey, we're going to need some time to find all that and pull it together, and we will contact you. That's a level three. I'm not really sure why Gimlet goes to six, but it does. So we just
Yeah.
when I train people on it, I'm like, look, if it's a base level question that takes you, 1 to 5 minutes, it's a one. If it's something where you're taking a lot longer, you're troubleshooting, you're doing, like I showed somebody yesterday how to use Explora, how to find citation information. That kind of thing is a little bit more in depth, and that's up to you.
We have a question too here. Michelle's asking, do you have
Oh,
any competitors you compare for Gimlet? Any other applications, platforms, a kind of comparison shop if you know.
yes. And of course, I'm drawing a blank on the name. There is another product out there. Um, when St. Louis pulled together a group of staff to evaluate products, there was a second product out there. And of course, I'm so sorry, I don't remember what the name of it is, but
I did a
it's,
little
I mean,
diligence. I did a little diligence on this one. This is a real mom and pop. This isn't a big corporation that does this. It's just some people and they are kind of focused on libraries. This one,
oh, Gimlet
uh,
or the other product.
2017. No, this one I thought,
Yeah,
but
Gimlet,
yeah.
Gimlet is small. It was developed for libraries. So, sorry, Michelle, I'm sorry, I don't remember it off the top of my head. There are other products out there. There is one that St. Louis looked at. It just didn't serve the needs. And with a multi-branch system, Gimlet made the most sense. And for a multi-branch system, anybody, remember, any staff member can run a report. If you are a multi-branch and you want to know which your busiest branch is, you run that report at the end of the day. Um, Carpenter Branch, at the time that I was there, was the second busiest location in the entire system. At the end of the day, my team usually somebody would like run that report and be like, okay, did we get the most questions? Because it's like a little bit of fun, healthy competition. Some days we did. One of the nice things about Gimlet is you don't have to enter everything right on the spot. So if you are helping people and you're like ding, 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 and you have three different things, you can go back and you can adjust them. Our technology assistants in St. Louis usually would just make notes and then go into the computer in the workroom and go back and Gimlet everything because you can go in and you can adjust the time on them manually. So they had like their own little chart that they would use, and then they would just take like 5 minutes, go back there, Gimlet a bunch of stuff. If I'm working on the public desk and I am really, really busy, that's what I'll do. Be like, meeting room check-in, question about this other thing, meeting room observation. This looks like ding, 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 ding. And then I can go back and adjust the time. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, Google search. Um, great, sorry.
Oh
Teams.
yeah, yeah.
Go through my teams. I think I did.
Yeah, we don't use the Google Teams, and then other people use Slack for stuff, and we don't do any of
Yeah,
that. So I'm always impressed when people are trying that and having what's and very, I know that's like, if you have a big specialized system, but a lot of our libraries too have, even the small libraries have in-depth questions and long questions, and so it's good to reflect that as well,
right.
that you are getting those, and you can say, guess what? We've had a ton of questions about our um, uh, gravesite resource, our where all the graveyards are in our area, and it's a good report. Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where product, I mean, I keep saying Gimlet because that's what I know and I've used it for years. But Gimlet lets us do that. So if we realize like we're getting a lot of questions about a certain service that we do,
Mhm.
like policies about our hotspots, then we look at that like, oh, okay, are we getting questions because the policies aren't clear? Are we getting questions? Are we saying not available to hotspots?
Yeah.
Do we maybe need to look into if we can get more? Things like that. But those are unique for us. Basic reference questions, I think, are things that we all share as libraries. But you know
Mm.
your library, you know the data that you want. And we also know that the state wants data from us, but we want our own data about stuff that we want to know about. This kind of a product lets you completely customize that for what you need.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, a lot of our libraries have little grants here or there. You really want to capture, how often people are using a STEM kit or something along those lines. You can do this, very important for that and your grant outcomes, but the state library doesn't necessarily reflect that, the reporting doesn't reflect that data. So, and the other big one here is a lot of our libraries, this size, are doing the mobile device printing. That's a very specific one. That's like you need to know how much time that's gobbling up, because I've seen lots of debate about lots of
Yes.
different products that don't work well, and they have some argument about how much time you're taking messing with that. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. We spend a fair amount of time showing people how to release their printouts. And so, if I look at the Gimlet data, there are days where the first hour of the day is study room, study room, study room, printing, printing, study room, collection, study room, printing, printing, study room, But it does help me to know how long my team is spending on some of these things because then it's like, okay, do we need the software people to make it clearer? Do we need, you know, bigger signs with instructions on how to scan stuff or whatever it is?
Right. Yeah. The
For,
the impact on signage too is
mhm.
big. Kind of having that. Your every building. the ones I know in this room, I'm thinking of every single different one and things that they have, and
Yeah.
unique problems. So I think we're kind of there for time today, but
Okay.
great questions. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Jen, so much for your great presentation.
Awesome. Thanks for letting me talk about